So thank you everyone for joining us today for our first of the 2025 EWI program, EWI Coffee Break from Chaos to Control, Smart Inventory Management. Before we do get started on that, though, I do need to thank our annual sponsors, without whom none of this would be possible. So thank you to Applied, NFP, Sony, and Taylor and Taylor for their generous contributions. And we'll get right into it here. That's enough about me talking about inventory management. I'm not the expert, so I'd like to invite Chris, Nick, and Alex to introduce themselves. So why don't you let us know who you are, tell us a little bit about your experience and what you do now and where you work. So we'll start with Chris from Arri.
Yeah, hi. Chris Cottone from Arri Rental, the director of operations. I've been with Arri Rental for about a decade now. Started as a service technician here, then service manager, and then eventually all the way up to director of operations. So I oversee all of our sites, all of our inventory management, which brings me to this call today. So yeah, definitely lots to share on that topic and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Alex from Daufenbach.
Hey there, I'm Alex Will. I'm the service manager here at Daufenbach Camera in Chicago. I started here in 2021 as the inventory manager. They were doing a transition from one inventory software to another, and I took that and kind of moved on to the service manager, and now I kind of oversee the inventory and the maintenance of each equipment that we own.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And lastly, let's hear from Nick with Keslow.
Hi, I'm Nick McKay. I work at Keslow currently. I started my career in at Sim and was moved over to Keslow with that acquisition. I've been working in some form of inventory management role for about 16 years now at this point, and it never does end, as you all know.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. And this is really the heart of it. So, what are the ways that inventory management software can affect a business, such as success of your jobs and profitability?
Well, I guess I'll get started a little bit. Well, the big key thing for us, and it's something that I've always kind of viewed it in a way for many, many years, is you need to know what you have, you need to know where it is, and you need to know is it making you money and how much, and so that you can actually make it money. That's it's the absolute core of the business. If when you're on the most small scale, you can do things with an Excel sheet. But as you start to grow, you can't count things by your hand anymore. And eventually you need a way to be able to track, to be able to generate invoices. It's really the second core thing to your business other than actually having equipment.
Yeah, so it really, you touched on the point that it kind of touches every part of the business. It's your salespeople, it's your accounting team, it's your operations team, it's your shop people, it's everyone touches that software.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, it makes it almost impossible, especially if you have an abundance of gear over across different sites, to just even track anything like that. So, inventory software is essential to everything that we do here, and it helps bring everybody together and tries to get everybody on the same page.
Thing that it helps with is it optimizes your turnarounds. It helps you get the most use out of your equipment. If you really can get, current and up-to-date information about where your equipment is and what it's doing. So, why is that important, and how do you kind of get around, why is it important to track the history of your equipment? Why do you need to know where it is on a daily basis? And how does that facilitate, the best use of your equipment?
I think it's the efficiency, right? Knowing exactly where it is, just like these guys touched on at any given time, and what the status is of that equipment. Before we jumped on this call, I was just updating a couple of cameras that were in service that somebody hadn't followed up on. So, if each department is not sticking with what they need to do within the system, it lets down the other side, right? Someone thinks it's available, but it's not available. So everybody has to play their part in that, again, the core of the business. It runs the business. When you have, like all three of our rental houses, multiple sites, thousands upon thousands of assets, you have to have that in order to be efficient. And if you don't, just like Nick touched on, you can't make money. Things that are on the shelf are not going to make you money. So knowing where they're at, what the status is, and what you can do with it is vital.
So what happens, when you lose history on an item?
Losing
Sorry.
history on an item, there's uh, is can be problematic. Um, but it depends on what the item is. Obviously, you have a camera, you will need to know its history in and out, back and forth, its service logs, um, how it was checked every single time going in, how he checked it was going out. It's less important on the BNC cable, right? So there's a little bit of give and take of how much effort is put in on tracking the service history of a BNC versus a camera or a lens, things that are costing thousands and thousands of dollars when something goes down. Because within our business, we're always trying to make sure that our clients are fully given all the tools in the full capacity that they're actually expected. The camera has to work all the way through. The lens needs to be perfectly aligned, and all those things that attention to details all our clients expect to have. But one of the things that also comes with that is we need to make sure that those items are full functional at complete perfect, and almost in especially with lenses, almost pristine order in that case. And it by having those records, it also now saves us uh, on the back end of life. So when a production comes back and that camera is in shambles, well, here was the full-on check that happened days before you took it. It is no longer in that case. This is now an L&D. So having that history really performs that. And then if it escalates to the point of, say, insurance or anything along those lines, we have all those records. And it does prove the case that this thing was functional and operational beforehand.
It could also give you kind of an aspect of maybe something's further wrong with a piece of equipment. Like, for example, I had something where an EVF monitor for an LF, or I'm sorry, a 35, just kept going out. I would replicate the problem from time to time, but then it would kind of work itself out. But when it would go onto the field, the EVF would kept going down. So, and this was a 35 that was just brand new out of the box. So, sent it in for repair one time, had the thing happen again, had to have a different conversation with Arri about getting this a new EVF in place for this because we had the service history of the same thing keep happening to this thing in a short amount of time. So that's another useful tool to help you kind of impact your tracking of certain items.
Your software itself, but do you have any kind of safeguards in place if you do lose history in your software?
I personally just kind of export stuff and transfer it into Excel and to also Google Sheets as well, just to have like a backup and kind of just date everything and build off of that mostly. In case anything, yeah, wonky goes in R2, in case there's any updates or things I need to add or subtract into the database.
Does anyone still keep paper?
I've heard about it, but that was before my time, at least
Yeah,
at our place.
yeah.
Um, uh, for service side of life of keeping information, there was a point where I want to say 3 years ago, we were still using paper in certain aspects. Um, Lens log files of, you
Oh,
can see a
yeah.
little bit of cosmetic damage, just things that we keep sort of as a bit of a piece because it's hard to digitize that information. And that has actually fully shifted to digital in a way for us now at this
Mhm.
point. But it wasn't too long ago that there was someone. But really, it's the information in our world is kind of logged in two forms. So
Yeah.
there is a way to back it up if there is a piece. And in terms of backing up any system that your rental system needs a backup. You need to have those fail safes. If you are doing an update, if you are doing things along those lines, that you're
Mhm.
doing massive changes, that you can do a restore back and make sure that you have those records on the backup, because it's more than just say repair service information that you need to store. It's invoices, it's everything else that goes down through that he needs to produce for financial audits or anything else. So having a backup of your rental system is imperative. An
Mhm.
IT plan needs to be put in place and everything else that goes along with that.
Let's talk about something that really does contribute to the efficiency of our systems. It's a big one. Naming conventions. Maybe Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about naming conventions, how you make sure your entire team is using the same names, understands what the names are, and can efficiently use your systems with the proper conventions in place?
Yeah. Everybody always wants to change them. Everybody's always got a better idea about what something should be called. For us, one of the nice things about having a global system is that you have to set a standard with that, right? So if you start changing things regionally, it can really mess up your overall global view. So we have an R2 global team that is a couple of individuals from mainland Europe, from London, from the US, and from Canada. And we meet regularly to agree on those type of things. What it's going to be, what it's going to be called. Thankfully with the industry that we're in, with Arri and Sony and other manufacturers, naming conventions can be fairly standard. So we try to stick to that, and that helps. I think the biggest part of that, especially with sales teams and people who are just coming on board, is education. You really have to teach people how to look and where to look and what to look for. If you've never used a rental system before, it's difficult. If you've been in it for 10 years or 16 like Nick, it becomes second nature. So I think training is a huge part of that. Try to keep your naming conventions flat and simple and searchable, and then just training people to understand it and what to look for, I think is a huge part. And giving them lines to reach out for help, I think is really important. So, if they can't find something, doesn't mean it needs to be changed. Just ask those questions and we can point you in the right direction. So I think, yeah, for us, the training is imperative.
Training is key. I have to definitely second that point, understanding what it is, and also giving the idea of you mentioned it's kind of standardized with a global aspect because most companies, a top handle is a top handle. It's kind of a uniform kind of way of doing it. But what you will get is a lot of people who want to call something what it's for, where I've always stuck to the ethos of you got to call it what it is, not what it's for. You can't say an FX9 top handle necessarily, or a top handle for FX9, and it's made by Shape. You're not going to figure out that it's not the Sony one in between. So you have to call it what it is and not what it's for. You can add maybe things, whatever helps you out to be able to. There's in a lot of softwares, R2 had it, where you can put in keywords, where if
Mhm.
you were to search Shape or FX9, you would get the Shape top handle, but that's what it is. But because you link the keyword of FX9 into it, it comes with it as well. So making sure that you're making use of all the functions of your rental system definitely allows you to ease the tensions. And then there's many other strategies as well to help guide people who are new to finding the right type of things, categories, subcategories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Alex, do you have any thoughts?
Um, no, I was just thinking of my own personal software challenges here where there was a lot of that, like, item for this thing, and it was a lot of cleaning up and having to kind of retrain around that to make sure that everybody was on the same page and nobody was getting confused looking for things. Also, I'll just say that it's also good to know what it is for a replacement value standpoint. If if it's labeled as Sony top handle, for example, but it's actually shape, there might be a different price point there. It might be harder to find, easier to find. It just kind of depends.
And Alex, you oversaw a transition between database systems at one point. Did you change naming conventions at that time? And did that require a lot of retraining of people?
Um, I when I first started, it was kind of in the process, like most of it had been done, and we were doing kind of the final touches. So I kind of kept things the way they were for the initial transfer, and then kind of picked the team's brain about like how can we make these, frankly, like these descriptions shorter because they're just when you export reports out of at least in R2, it'll have multiple lines or rows for however long your thing is. So there's like a character uh, setup where it basically will drop down and you'll have to clean all that up and or things
Mhm.
will be shortened if you just delete it. So there was a lot of just kind of collaboration and just trying to make sure that what can we do to just make sure that like we all know how to work this stuff because we were all kind of learning it at the same time as well.
Mhm.
So it was definitely an experience.
So here's another huge one I think that we all love to discuss in the inventory management world, and it's barcoding. So how do you choose what to barcode? Um, when do you barcode? Why do you barcode? I know that's like 8 questions. Nick, you want to kick it off?
Uh, if I could have my way, I would barcode everything and barcode nothing at the same time. It's
That is the
um,
right answer.
exactly. Um, there are things that obviously we can speak to the end a little bit more towards the future where barcoding is going, but I got a few stances where it's if it can be taken off and it is especially if it's expected to be possibly taken off or removed or separated by a production crew, that is your first line. It should have a barcode. The second line after that point is if can it have a barcode? Not everything we have has the ability to be barcoded. Think of an iris rod. If you were to put an actual physical sticker on an iris rod, you could do that. There's the argument that you could possibly do engraving on an iris rod. Does it affect it? Does it get scanned? Is it capable of doing that? There can be a decision made, obviously, at value versus return of effort versus an iris rod is $40, hunk of metal and it's $40. That's a different conversation of how much expensive some things are in our industry, but uh, but it's not a $10,000 monitor or something else. So some things by necessity have to be counted by quantity, and there are many programs that have the ability to choose between how you track things. Is it a barcoded item versus a non-barcoded item? And some things can be just quantity. Um, and you got to make sure where that line is. The thing that you lose with a quantity item more than anything else is history. So if it is something that you want to be able to track service records and things along those lines, it can't be quantity. You need to do that to the individual item. Back to Alex's point of trying to track down a problematic thing with one particular EVF that keeps on going down. You want to find out if something's a lemon. Well, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Um, it's these particular things. And also, how do you, what type of barcodes you use, material. There's testing that you kind of want to do. There's also how you choose what type of codes go onto it. That's another methodology conversation. But barcoding or not barcoding in specifics really comes down to, can the crew lose it? Do I want to bill it for them? That's that's the end all be all.
Let's talk a little bit more just about barcoding. So what types of items might you make quantity versus what type of items you would make individual. So you mentioned the service records and stuff, but like very plainly, kind of is it, you know, in the camera world, I've come from lighting grip world. So what is it in the camera world that you kind of think of as, there's clamps or what items are quantity versus serial?
Yeah, a lot of clamps, screws, that are uh what else? I know like here for a while, like it was the blank focus rings. It was like, do you barcode those? Do you make those just quantities? Stuff like that. A lot of sliders. I personally think, stuff like on the WCU motors, like we have barcodes on those, but they're impossible to scan. So I'm kind of like, what are we doing here, kind of thing. But yeah, it's just a lot of stuff like that.
What does barcoding add to your inventory system? I imagine efficiency is one of the big things.
Yeah, I was gonna say tracking and efficiency are the two key ones, if you ask me.
Yeah, and can we specifically speak to, Chris, maybe how it adds to efficiency, barcoding?
Tracking stuff down. When you're looking for that one little piece that you have to have, or a piece that an AC had before and he wants the same one again. It's knowing where things are. It's also keeping track of your quantities, right? If you're running low on something, it helps a lot with that. Um, there's numerous reasons, but it can also work against you. When we're talking about these really low dollar items that Alex just mentioned, for us, it's always like camera antennas, which we can get fairly inexpensively. They get lost all the time. You kind of start to learn, if it's constantly showing up on your missing list and it costs you $1, why am I tracking it? It's some things you kind of just have to learn to let it go if it's not going to cost you a terrible amount in the end. If you're spinning your wheels doing a lot of work chasing it, it's not worth it. But barcoding, it's extremely helpful. It can get complex too. Like I'm sure these guys as well. There's a lot of lenses that can be converted into different focal lengths. So it's not really one asset. An Ingenue Easy Zoom is really two or three assets. How do you handle that? That's where it gets really complicated. You have to have people that know the system and can adjust that when the lens gets changed over so it reflects accurately what you're looking at. So, there's a lot of upside to it. But, I think the overall point that I'm hearing here is, and we know this too, sometimes if you go too crazy, it can slow you down.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that.
Physical placement is also something that is randomly considered, especially when you start coming across with multiple locations. And one person's barcoding it on the front of the lens, one person's barcoding on the rear of the lens. Um, or cameras. You have 15 barcodes on a camera because it's got fully built out with a cage system. Are those, when it's built up, can you physically get to them? Do you have to disassemble the camera to be able to get to it? That becomes a disservice. Um,
Mhm.
and talk about efficiency. Efficiency goes down the way of trying to count things. Um, it it acts as a good way of a checks and balances in both in that aspect. Um, but if I say I'm putting out an order and I've got to have this camera and I'm my technician who is pulling the equipment, readying it for a job, they have a list of 20 things they need to scan. That acts as a good thing because that makes sure that they're getting everything that needs to go out, that they're not missing something by accident because they don't have to not count it per se. So that's another element of adding efficiency that we're not trying to double up work. Oh, did we get everything? Did we not get everything? Are they going to be okay when they get that camera? Um, so being able to scan things quickly and efficiently is very key. There's a level of maintenance that also comes with it, of being able to replace a barcode as it physically wears and tears down, and being able to update and track that history. Um, there's a lot of that aspect. And then I think, Chris, you also mentioned about tracking things down. Having something physically in my building and trying to see all the points in which it was scanned allows me to help me physically find it in my own building. Forget that it's out on a job. Just, oh, it was scanned by a service technician. Oh, it might be over at Jimmy's desk. Trying to see that, and then you can see the progression of the timestamps of when it was scanned. So, yeah.
I just had like a question for you guys here. If a barcode comes off, like what do you guys have like printers over there? Or how do you guys handle that?
Either way, we found that you can use P-Touch to print ones if you're in a pinch. We have a little bit more industrial ones that we use that last a little longer. And if you try to manipulate them, they get destroyed, so they have to be replaced. So there's, some safety aspect to those. But yeah, there's multiple ways, specifically with R2, where you can generate the barcode. It's just kind of what you're putting it on and how long do you want it to last.
Right.
It's the big thing. We've tried different barcode manufacturers. Some are great, others terrible. Ink rubs off in 2 weeks and you never go back to them again. So
Yeah, we had our
testing is
iris.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, we had iris rods lasered, but some of them have started to wear off. So, it's
Yeah, it
Um,
it happens. To Nick's point earlier about barcodes being in the right place. We had a guy that was doing barcodes for us for a little while that loved to hide them. And he didn't realize he was making it impossible for everyone on the other end trying to
yeah,
scan the gear out to find the stuff, and then you end up missing things.
yeah.
So, we had to sit him down and explain, look, that really has a domino effect down the line, what you're doing. They can't find it, and it comes up missing. Now we're questioning the client. The reality is you tucked in on the wrong part of that particular piece. So it's very important that, through all the different departments and offices and locations and everybody, that everybody's on the same page with how it works with placement and scanning and what is barcoded and what isn't and what's quantity and what's not. So again, training, very, very important when people come on board so they understand how those things work.
yeah, we've had those
Yeah.
conversations as well.
To the point of, like, one other element about placement is when things do get worn down. I had an instance where we had to really start training some people about mat boxes. Crews would regularly put Velcro on your flags and things on the positioning of where it is you have to go the ease of scan, but you also have to think of what the crews are going to be doing with this particular piece of equipment. If they're putting Velcro on the thing, that barcode comes off every time. And so, well, in that particular case, it was easy to theoretically track down. I got 3 barcodes that are missing. I got 3 pieces here that are no barcodes, and you can reassign and reassess. I have been in multiple systems. I have been in systems where it is user generated or system generated based on rules. R2 had that ability of being able to sort of put a prefix and a suffix you can have a bit of a nomenclature come through and count numbers as that aspect. But then you're at the whim of producing your things on the other aspect. The other aspect is you having pre-generated barcodes and then assigning going from a large print house. My ID tag, I think, is one of them. And you can print off 10,000 barcodes and then eventually start assigning them to the things that as you produce. Now, those can be a lot more robust, a lot more things, depending on your product cases. You want to have something that's a little bit more metallic, a little bit more, it's going to take a harder beating. And then you're just assigning those barcodes to the product as you receive them to that asset record. And most inventory systems have the ability to update the barcode. Serial number is always key. If you can do an engraving, to understand that that was what that number was. It's not maybe a scanning readable bar engraving, but it becomes like a serial number so that anytime you need to re-update the barcode or replace the barcode, you're keeping that history intact, and you can always reference to the one immovable item is the serial number. Personally, there's always been arguments between pre-generated, just a 7-digit number versus an alphanumeric coding that gives you clues to what that product is. If you want to make sure, there's a SKU that is a part of the actual name in your system. You have an equipment name, but you also have a product ID of some sort. And that SKU becomes the front part of your barcode, maybe with a dash and, 0001, 0012, 001,000. So this is 1,000th piece, but that front end can help become an identifier for you as well, in which think if I have 3 cables that look next to identical, I can tell which one's what based on that front end code without having to scan it. So there's pluses and minuses to everything. One's more upkeep, one's easier, one could be easier to go through.
So I'm going to ask one more pointed question about barcoding, and then I'm going to open it up to our guests here for some questions as well. But one is, so when you're barcoding, if you have a group of items that all always go out together as a kit, but there's more than one item that kind of goes into the case to make that a functional item, do you barcode the whole kit? Do you barcode the box? Do you barcode each individual item? I mean, how do you make that work? Uh, Chris, what do you think?
It depends on what it is. You can do kits with an R2. We use them all the time. They're super helpful for the sales team, and the floor staff as well. I think it was Nick who made the point earlier. You want to make sure that you're getting everything that goes with that small HD or that Alexa 35. They're going to have a multiplicity of components. Now, Alexa 35 is an example. The majority of that is barcoded. It'll be set up as a kit. There may be 1 or 2 small, low dollar value quantity items in there that'll be included in the list or the kit, but they may be non-serial. So, doing a single barcode for a multiplicity of items, probably not the best way to go, at least for us. You want to build in those assurances that everybody's going to get what they need with that particular kit. So, most of the software is pretty versatile in how you can set that up depending on what you need to do.
I know R2 allows you to have locked kits and unlocked kits, if I recall.
You can do that as well. You can lock pricing, you can lock discount. The more you get into it, the options are endless.
Yeah.
And if you've got a good software company, R2 is pretty flexible like this. If you want to develop something with them and have something that's not in their software, they're willing to have that conversation. They will give you a price tag, like any good company would, but they've definitely helped us with some things we've needed to work on system-wise, specific to Arri Rental that we needed to change. Yeah.
And then we get the benefit as someone else who's also on too, because it comes into the next update.
This is true. Yeah, this is definitely true.
Yeah, I do believe R2 also. I remember we were working with R2 on crewing element aspect of labor billing and stuff that they were kind of doing at one point in the past. And they just said, just hold on a sec. Just hold on a sec. And, a year later it was done. And we found out it happened to be Disney out of all companies because they use it for their hoteling and their event space management to book out hotel rooms at one point. Things come from other people. So, whatever I will say for that development aspect, whatever systems you do maybe employ is to be in communication with those vendors to understand, see what the updates are coming. A lot of those vendors will have meetings down at Infocom or at NAB and corresponding type events where they bring in a lot of their customers, and they all sort of have those discussions of what are the pain points and what are the things. Other people who are in your boat may already built out a solution of some sort of way to fix that problem that you're having that R2 isn't quite finished with doing internally, but it also helps them do their prioritization. So it might not cost you anything unless it's a really imperative thing for you.
And
All right, let's oh, sorry.
always test before an update.
Yes.
Because they will pull out updates and something that worked yesterday will not work tomorrow. So always, they're good about giving you a heads up, but always test before you get an update because
That's a
things
good
can
one.
change.
Chris, how do you guys, out of curiosity, I'm going to ask a question here. How do you guys do your tests before a rollout? Like, what's the level of your testing that you do?
Depending on what it is, we're in constant communication with R2 and they'll always let us know when an update is coming, specifically what it is about. So let's say it's like a service module update, or maybe they're changing something in their functionality to the service ticket. A week or two before, they'll give us, we actually have a live site and a test site with R2. So we will go into that test site and we will just run through our regular routine on that new update and make sure everything's functioning like it should. So one of the benefits of having that test site is the ability to do that. You don't have to do anything in the live unit. So that's super helpful. But yeah, we try to be in a deep communication with them about, okay, what is the change? Which module is it in? What have you guys tested? So what have they gotten to? And then we'll layer another layer of testing on top of that to make sure it's not going to have an ill effect on us. And it has happened in the past where, you miss something and maybe you didn't hit a certain aspect and then it comes up down the road and you've got to build a workaround. So it's important to do that for sure.
Do you have a checklist?
Yeah, our processes are all written down. So again, I'll go back to that service module example. Somebody gets a piece of equipment that's broken. There's a whole list of steps they go through to get it in, get it logged, update the status of the service ticket, close the ticket when it's done, make sure the pricing is in there, make sure it's tied to the invoicing. So we'll have them run through all of those steps to make sure that they're all functional and that everything is working.
Yeah, because that's in previously when I was doing work with Rental Works, the IT department was very rigorous with their testing, and it did save us a few times before we uploaded. We also, at that time, had multiple divisions of lighting and grip and post and playback and cameras. Like it was a big thing undertaking, and we would bring in teams, and it would be tested for about a 2-week period heavily, and we would try to stress test the thing simultaneously of 30 people on the system in a 1 hour period of your day. You were going to do it all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you really need to not go down.
Yeah, 100%. We'll do that regionally as well. We'll have EU do it one day, or we'll do it at the same time, and UK will test, and then we'll test in the US. So we bounce that around a lot. And yeah, to your point, run it through the paces to make sure it's not going to screw you in the end.
All right, well, let's open it up to questions. We do have one in our chat here. So, and to our participants, please feel free to throw any questions into the chat or just chime in with a question. We'd love to hear from you. So let's start with this one. I think it's a great one. How often do you update used or replacement value?
That's a tough one. If everything was 100% up to date, I'd probably have an army of people doing that 24/7. But it doesn't quite work that way. It does fall a little bit into the accounting world where you get into asset valuations and how old something is, because obviously things lose value over time. Most of the time, let's say we have a missing and damage or an L&D that comes up. If it's a high dollar item, we will update it per M&D, because you can't keep a rolling update. You really have to assess, has this item become old enough that it's no longer has value on our books? So there's a lot to that. And then obviously when you're bringing on new assets, those get updated when you purchase them, right? Because it's tied to the purchase order and you'll update that value when you ingest that asset. But it's something to keep an eye on, especially with your M&Ds. Seen some things come through where I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not what that cost in 2026. So yeah, you have to keep a close eye on things for sure. It's hard when you have as many assets as some of us have. So yeah, got to keep an eye on that.
The one thing I also want to make sure is there's a clarity between replacement cost versus actual cost or depreciation.
Right.
Those are actually three different values in your system to a degree. In my world, our actual depreciated cost is actually not even in our system. It is calculated totally by accounting 100%. It's completely removed from our inventory system, actually in the accounting system. But as for replacement cost, your replacement cost always sits to the equipment name in my world. So that BSA 1, Aries BSA 1, that costs $950, call it say. You know what I mean? And it will have multiple values depending on your market. We will have a Canadian value because we operate in Canada. We have a US value. I'm sure Arri also has a euro value and a pounds value and a few others into their mix as well, depending on all the markets that they operate to. Or you have the ability to choose a single defining value and play with what the exchange rate is on that particular day. You could go that route as well. Yeah, that's a methodology. But then you also have what is your replacement? What if the BSA 1's gone? What's the replacement to the 703 monitor that I'm sure everyone probably has in their inventories to a certain extent that is now, for the third time, officially been discontinued because they can't make panels for the third time again. But so what's the replacement value? Yes, that 10-year-old monitor on my books is $0 because it's been fully written off at this point. But if it gets lost or damaged, there's still an L&D that's going to come. And the replacement value is essentially the replacement product, the equivalent of what is the new market value of something. So that becomes into pace. That actually caused, and PERG has probably got a little bit of history with knowing that it actually caused a bunch of insurance scams a long time ago when Arri came out with Master Primes. Because what was happening was the Red One had just come out, digital cameras were just the price of, and one of the hot tickets were super speeds, the Zeiss super speeds. And to get an equivalent of a Zeiss Arri product that had a T13 speed for its aperture, the only replacement was the Master Prime at that time. So there were people who were staging fake break-ins, going through an insurance policy, going through the scam, and losing that $25,000 set of super speeds and coming out with a $250,000 set of Master Primes. Because that's what the replacement was. So sometimes the value does technically go up.
The older the asset, especially with lenses, the harder it is.
Right.
Finding equivalents. We have a lot of one-off lenses, proprietary lenses that we make that are built out of donor glass. So it's
I can only imagine how you also are the company that set the price in the first place.
Right.
This can be a challenge with some insurance companies.
Yeah. It's plenty of claims that I've gone through where, you're explaining every part and where it came from and why you can't get it again.
We've had a super speed stolen, so
yeah. Well, what is the replacement value? Priceless.
Yeah, some cases. I'm sure there's some things in the Arri's archives.
Yeah. So we also have some folks from Rental Works and Rental Tracker here, Melissa and Bo. So we'd love to hear a little bit from them and see if they have any thoughts on what we've heard about today with tracking and barcoding. And so hello, Melissa and Bo, are you around?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, I am.
okay, yeah.
Cindy and Bo here from Rental Tracker. Thoughts. Geez, how much time do you have? A lot of thoughts. A lot of your speaking points resonates with us very much. We can definitely some of the things that stood out to me was there was mentioning about people changing naming conventions. Just so you know, of not being a pitch here, but I can speak to the fact that we understand that we have security in place for specific fields. We have a proper audit trail. Who's changing it? And more importantly, before we even for our existing clients, we are very specific on best practices. We take pride in not showing them what's available, but what we recommend, and we understand the pain points. So we put things in place where logins are specific to their responsibility and segregation of duties. And if you do happen to miss that security, we have a proper audit trail, what it used to be and what it is now. And or when a barcode is reassigned. There were questions about mat boxes and whatnot. I used to be an AC myself working on a movie set. Mat boxes, as we all know, are Velcroed, A cam, B cam, filter type. Those get torn off. Barcodes need to get replaced. We have that proper audit trail of it used to be barcode 1, 2, 3. Now it's 4, 5, 6. With regards to backups and updates, the importance of testing, I agree with Chris, Alex, and Nicholas 1,000%. So obviously, if you're self-hosted on-prem, of course you need a proper IT or DBA to do your backups. And when you do an update, testing is required. Of course, if we are hosting the client, we do have a SaaS model as well. And obviously that proper UAT and proper updates and release notes are provided to our clients in the same mannerism as Chris was mentioning at Arri, where our team would give them a proper notice heads up. I can go on and on if you have questions for me.
Hi.
Melissa, hey.
Hi. Yeah. I thank you for having us here, by the way. Like
Yeah,
great to
thank
be
you.
like fly on the wall. Um, very similar to Rental Tracker, right? We have, in terms of like the alternate names, like we have the AKAs for searching by description. I was a user of the system before I ever worked for the company. So the first thing I did when I took over Rental Works for MGM Resorts was common naming. And one person gets to make the names of the things because everyone would do something a little different, right? A lens dash for space 5 as opposed to a forward dash space lens. So that's like a internal process that everyone ends up working out and like finding the thing, but having those AKAs or the option for tags, which are just keywords. AKAs can print in different places, but just alternate ways to find things, making it the easiest for the sales team. The as well as the build docs, right? Every new build that comes out, there's 3 pages of I say it's just like when you update your app, like an app on your iPhone, and it's like, hey, here's all the things we changed. So going through all of those and seeing anything that catches your eye, or be like, hey, this new enhancement. If it's a whole big new module or something, we'll put out a release about it. But everything that changes in each build is in those. And we also have, when we were talking about kits for barcoding. So RentalWorks has this thing called container, which is where one barcode can speak for many barcodes. So I have, 40 things hard mounted in a rack, but I don't want to scan each of those receivers, right? I just want to scan the wood on the outside. So you build a container that says, when I scan this one barcode, I still want all of my individual items barcoded and tracked individually, but I don't want to like break my wrist to get in the back of the rack to scan that receiver. So I just have one barcode that speaks for them all, and it makes the checkout and the check-in a lot easier for the warehouse. Now the sales team can still put kit on and they don't care if it's a container or not. But then when you scan that one barcode, all of those barcodes are checked out as serialized items.
I agree.
That's actually a really
Also,
cool
for
function.
questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to speak to that point with the RW's kit container concept. It's something I've actually used. It does work quite well. One thing to manage though is for best practices in that case, I would always recommend that you have to scan everything on the in, not on the out.
Yep.
You can trust
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
your
So
team haven't
Agree.
rearranged. You take that case and you zip tie it close after you establish that container.
correct.
And
Yes.
that's a key aspect to it though. It is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah.
For
I
sure. We
agree.
now have the setting that like it can auto scan everything in on the in for the people that aren't necessarily worried about things being removed. But then for containers that have like two VLs in a road case, right? You don't want those to check in. You want to go through and get the clamps and the units and whatnot. And then so there's the option to auto rebuild. So after I've scanned all of the individual things, do I want to auto recontain? Or do I
Correct.
just want to scan one barcode and have it all like checked all in and recontain at the same time?
Yes. That flexibility is quite common, and I can attest to what Melissa is saying. Correct. Things go out, you scan one barcode. When it comes back in, you have the flexibility and option to dismantle it as individual items that you must scan it back in individually, especially ones that require proper inspection or QC. And this is especially true with our clients over in the UK, where items must be pat tested for inspection, and it must be treated as individual items. Going back to barcoding, right? It must be barcoded. It can't be a non-coded item for proper pat testing or QC.
Well, excellent. I think that's all we really have time for. We've hit 2 p.m. So thank you everyone for coming and joining us. And thank you so much to Alex and Chris and Nick for giving us your thoughts, and also for Melissa and Bo and joining in here at the end.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.